So your students finished their worksheet or the exercise that you have set, but the rest of the class is still working on it. So you need to find something for them to do for a few minutes while the rest of the class finish. I'm really keen on encouraging students to think in a critical way and play around with maths and numbers and explore different things and challenge themselves in different ways. So I really like these box types of exercises, and these particular ones were part of an article that I read about on Twitter to encourage students to sort of think critically. Now, for this first one, I mean, you could do it as part of a number lesson, or you could just do it as an extension to a class about something completely different. It could be something completely abstract. The aim is just to get them kind of thinking critically. Now, the most common numbers that a student's going to put in there, if they aren't totally terrified by the whole idea, is 0.2 and 0.7. Which, yeah, that is the answer, but we don't want that as the answer. We want them to try and think a bit deeper and a bit more meaningful about it and play around with different numbers to see what they could come up with. So we could have 1 times 0.14, or we could have 2 times 0.07. So they're using different kinds of maths to sort of work out the sums and come up with different numbers. And you could also set different criteria. You could say it could be an integer and a decimal, or an integer greater than 10 and a decimal. And the same applies to the next question as well. This is another sort of missing numbers exercise where they have to make the calculation work. And by setting different sort of criteria, a 3-digit decimal and any other number, or 2 fractions, they can come up with a whole load of different numbers and different combinations, which should hopefully keep them occupied while the rest of the class is actually finishing off the work that you have set them. My next example again is a missing number box, and this can be used with an integer class, and I think probably the most obvious ones that students are going to go for is probably the 2 and the 3. But again, you don't want that as an answer. That is the answer, but give me another one. So you could have a 5 and a 0. You could have square root of 25 and a 0. You could play around with so many different sort of combinations and different numbers, and it really encourages the students to think critically and think a bit deeper about numbers and the way that maths works. My next example is to do with straight line graphs. So again, this would be perfect at the end of a lesson that talks about straight line graphs. And in this example, you want the student to find a line that is parallel to this one. So that is understanding what it means by a parallel line and what different combinations you can have. So again, you're kind of looking for things like you might want something, say, like we're quite adventurous, 10y equals 40x minus 1, because this is only where it crosses the y-axis, so it's not affecting whether it's parallel or not. And you're looking for all sorts of different combinations. You could have something like which I don't think any student is going to write, but it is about thinking critically and thinking outside of what you would call the box, even though I hate that term, thinking in a different way and expanding their thoughts to challenge themselves with different numbers and different combinations, and does it work, does it not work? And that is the whole kind of idea behind these exercises. My last one would go with things like linear equations, and by this question you're asking them to come up with the linear equations which they would then solve to find the number that you are thinking of. So if I just put that in there. Okay, so then they would need to solve that. And then what they could do as a slight extension to that is you could ask them to write their own question, which could be used at the beginning of the next lesson as a sort of review of a recap of this lesson by coming up with a couple of different combinations and questions. They are perfect then to use for the next lesson. So I really would like to encourage the students to think more critically about maths and about the way that they do things, and hopefully they won't find these questions too scary or too challenging. Thank you.